I need you to stay with me for the next 20 minutes because this episode matters. They all matter, but we spent the last few episodes going deep into the psychology of money. We talked about the scarcity mindset, the survival posture, the inherited financial trauma, and all of that is real. But I'll be doing this audience a disservice if I let you leave this arc thinking that the reason Black men struggle financially is primarily a mindset problem, because we both know it's not. The mindset is real, the psychology is real, and the work rewiring it is really necessary. But the mindset did not come from nowhere. It did not spontaneously generate inside Black households. It was produced deliberately, systematically, over centuries by policies and structures designed to prevent exactly the kind of wealth building we're talking about on this show. Today, we're going to name those policies. I'm tripping on my words. We're going to look at the numbers clearly without flinching. And then, because you already know Sinai does not end despair, we're going to talk about our generation and what we can do about it. Not waiting for reparations, not waiting for the system to fix itself, building right now with what we have, louder, harder, and smarter than any generation before us, man. This is Sana I'm XO. Let's get into it. Let's start with where we actually are, because I think most people have a vague sense that the racial wealth gap exists, but they don't know the specific numbers, and the specific numbers truly matter. You cannot fight what you cannot clearly see. So let's talk about it. The median Black family in America has a net worth of $44,100. The median net worth in white families has $282,310. Yes, I said 282,000. That's not something we can go just really fly by. That means the median white family has 6.4 times the wealth of the median Black family, and that gap is not shrinking. In 2024, Duke University Samuel Dubois Cook Center for Social Equity published research correcting a widely cited calm claim that the racial wealth gap was closing. Their finding is the gap is actually growing exponentially. From 2019 to 2022, the mean gap in net worth between Black and white households grew from 841,900 to 1.1 million, a 38% increase. Black Americans hold 3.4% of total U.S. family wealth, while making up 11.4% of households. White Americans hold 84.2% of total wealth, while making up 66% of households. That's not a gap. That's like the Grand Canyon. 44% of Black Americans own a home. 73% of white Americans own a home. Since home ownership is a primary wealth building vehicle for most American families, that disparity alone explains a massive portion of the gap. Only 8 of 500 Fortune 500 CEOs are Black, less than 2%. The median worker earns 24% more than the median Black worker with the same education in the same fields. And Black students carry an average of 11 to 20% more student loan debt than white students, then graduate into lower average incomes than white graduates with the same degree. They enter wealth building game already behind with a heavier backpack. And trust me, these are not opinions. These are current data points as we speak right now. And I want you to hold them, not to feel hopeless, but to understand exactly what field we're playing on. Because you cannot develop a winning strategy without an accurate picture of the game. And this is the accurate picture right here. So let's dive into the gap. This gap didn't happen because of poor financial decisions. It did not happen because of cultural attitudes toward money. It happened because of policy. Specific, documented, deliberate policy over multiple centuries. Let me give you the condensed version of it, because every Black man deserves to know this history. And because understanding it changes how you see the scarcity mindset we've been discussing all our. Let's start with slavery. 246 years of unpaid labor. The foundational theft, enslaved people were legally prohibited from owning property, accumulating wealth, or passing anything to their children. 4 centuries of compounding was stolen before it even began. Reconstruction and its collapse. After emancipation, there was a brief window, Reconstruction, where Black Americans began rebuilding. Black-owned businesses, banks, land, political representation. Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, also known as Black Wall Street, was one of the most prosperous Black communities in the nation. That's until 1921, when it was destroyed by a white mob. Hundreds of people were killed. 35 square blocks burned to the ground. The wealth, generational, communal, real, was erased in 18 hours, and no one was compensated. Jim Crow. Legal segregation across the South and de facto segregation across the North. Separate and deliberately unequal schools, hospitals, courts, and economic systems. Black Americans paid taxes into systems that explicitly excluded them from the benefits. And after World War II, the GI Bill gave millions of returning veterans low-interest loans to buy homes, the single largest wealth-building opportunity in American history. But Black veterans were systematically denied access to those loans by lenders and the FHA. White families used those loans to enter the suburbs, build equity, and compound wealth across generations. Black veterans were locked out. That one policy alone, applied over decades of compounding, accounts for an enormous portion of the wealth gap that exists today. That leads me up to redlining. The FHA officially graded neighborhoods and neighborhoods where Black Americans lived were marked red, deemed as hazardous, and denied mortgage lending. Those neighborhoods were starved of investment. Property values were artificially suppressed. When your home cannot build equity, your primary wealth vehicle stalls. The consequences of redlining are still measurable in credit scores, property values, and school funding today. Because school funding is tied to property taxes, and property taxes reflect decades of suppressed Black home values, it's crazy. That leads me up to, I think, the biggest one that's really discussed, which is mass incarceration. The United States incarcerates more people than any nation on earth. And Black Americans are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of white Americans. A criminal record eliminates access to housing, employment, financial services, and federal student aid. It does not just remove a man from his community temporarily, it systematically dismantles his economic future. And the wealth transfers kept flowing from other people. White families inherited the homes from purchase with GI Bill loans. They inherited the equity built in neighborhoods that were protected and invested in. They inherited businesses, networks built in communities that were never burned down. And those transfers compounded. Only 10% of Black families receive any kind of wealth transfers across generations, compared to 46% of white families. This is the architecture of the gap. It's not accidents, not culture. This is policy, sustained. This is deliberate and intergenerational. And I'm not telling you this so you can feel victimized. I know I put a lot on you. I'm like, man, it was like, feel like I was swinging punches at y'all. But I'm telling you this so you can stop blaming yourself for a structural problem and start challenging that energy into the actual work of building. Here's the piece that connects directly to what we've been building all arc. Operating inside a system that was designed to exclude you. Knowing the history, feeling the daily evidence of it in wages, credit scores, even your neighborhoods, is a documented psychological burden. Researchers call it minority stress, the chronic low-grade activation of threat response that comes from navigating a world that is structurally hostile to your advancement. Ain't that something? And you know what it shows up as? Hypervigilance, as a default assumption that the system will work against you, because historically it has, as an internalized sense that wealth is something other people get to have, as a scarcity mindset that is not just an individual psychological, individual psychology, but a rational response to a real structural reality. So let me tell you this. Research published in 2024 confirms that psychological impact of racial economic inequality extends beyond financial stress into clinical mental health outcomes. Increased rates of anxiety, depression, and chronic stress in Black Americans that correlate directly with wealth disparities and financial exclusion. The racial wealth gap is not just an economic crisis, it is a mental health crisis, and the men who are navigating both simultaneously building financially while carrying the psychological weight of structural racism and doing something generally hard that most financial advice completely ignores. I want to name that and I want to honor it. You're not just building wealth to just build it. You're not just trying to build wealth in neutral environment. You are building a headwind. And the fact that you're still here, still listening, still working, still refusing to let the system write your financial story, that is not ordinary. That is an act of resistance that deserves to be named as such. But here's where I want to push you. Honoring the headwind cannot become a reason to stop running because the gap does not close from the outside, not fast enough, not reliably enough. The gap closes when our generation builds at a level that the system cannot ignore and stop. So let's talk about what we do about it. Because I'm not going to tell you to wait for reparations, not because the argument is invalid. It is, but because waiting is a strategy that costs you compound interest every single year, you still sit and wait. I'm not going to tell you the system will fix itself. The data we already know says it won't. The gap is growing, not shrinking. Policy change matters and advocacy matters and voting matters, but none of that pays your bills this month or build your net worth next year. What I'm going to tell you is this. Our generation has tools, access, information that no generation before us has had. The internet, we have financial education everywhere. Brokerage accounts can be opened in 10 minutes with just $20. Business can be built without a storefront. Wealth can be created in this environment at a speed and scale that was genuinely impossible for our grandparents and their grandparents, regardless of the headwind. And the most powerful thing we can do right now, individually or even collectively, is build so well and so consistently that the gap closes from our side. It really comes down to us. So here's how we do it. 5 moves for you. And trust me, these are not abstract. Number 1, own something. The home ownership gap is one of the most significant drivers of wealth disparity. If home ownership is accessible to you in your market, pursue it. Equity compounds. Renting builds someone else's wealth. If home ownership is not yet accessible, invest in assets that appreciate. Index funds, REITs, your own business, own something that grows. Number 2, invest early and consistently. Consistently. The racial wealth gap and investment returns is enormous. Not because Black Americans are bad investors, but because historically we were excluded from the market and because many of us are starting later due to student debt, income gaps, and lack of financial education. The answer to starting late is starting now and being consistent in that process. Timing the market beats timing the market every single time. Even if you just put in $50 a month in an index fund, that eventually builds up and turns up to $500 a month, started from 5 years from now. So it's all about starting right now. Putting that time in the market, not trying to time it. Number 3, build and support Black businesses. Black business owners have a net worth of 12% higher than non-business owners in their community. Entrepreneurship is one of the fastest individual pathways out of the wealth gap, and Black-owned businesses create jobs and wealth that circulate within the community. Build your own, support others. The ecosystem grows when we invest in it. Brookings Institution research is right. Wealth begets wealth. The compounding effect works both ways. It is what built the gap. It is what will close it. Every dollar invested today does not just grow, it grows at an accelerating rate. The men in our generation who are starting to build now or stay consistent, who choose ownership over consumption, they will not just change their own financial reality, they will change what their children inherit. The compounding starts with the first decision. Number 4, close the knowledge gap deliberately. Financial literacy was not taught in most of our schools. We know that, right? That's why y'all listen to this. That's why we're on the pod. That was not by accident. Underfunded schools and historically redlined neighborhoods produce exactly that outcome. But we have access now. Use it, read, listen, ask questions, surround yourself with people who know more than you about money and are willing to talk about it. The knowledge gap is closable. It closes one conversation at a time, one book at a time, one episode at a time. Number 5, which be talk about money in your household. Break the silence. One of the most damaging legacies of financial trauma and scarcity is the silence around money in families and friendships and communities. That silence preserves ignorance across generations. Talk about budgets, talk about investing, talk about debt and credit card and income with your kids, with your partner, with your brothers, with your family. Normalize the conversation. The next generation should not have to figure this out from scratch the way we did. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. A lot of facts, a lot of stuff that was dropped on this episode. But here, man, I'm gonna take a drink, man. It's getting hot in here, man. But overall, I'm gonna take a sip real quick. Here's what I want to leave you with. The racial wealth gap is real. The history that created it is documented. The systems that sustain it are still active. None of that is debatable. None of that is your fault. But your response to it, that is entirely yours. You can spend your energy being angry at the system that was designed before you were born. That anger is justified. It's also expensive, man. It costs you the focus, the clarity, and the time that building requires. Or you can take the time, take that justified anger and turn it into fuel. Let the history make you hungrier. Let the gap make you more intentional. Let the knowledge that the system was designed to stop you become the reason you build with more precision, more consistency, and more urgency than anyone expected. The most radical thing a Black man can do in this economy is build generational wealth. Not for himself alone, for his children, for his community, for the generations that come after him who will inherit something different because of what he chose to do right now. That is the assignment. Next week, we're moving into practical wealth building. We're starting from zero, what to do first and how to build a financial foundation that lasts. The conversation just went from context to instruction. Y'all saw the last episode, we talked about life insurance, had the interview with Joe Walton, a very great episode. That's another way to build wealth as well. But with that being said, share the show with anybody who needs it. We have to learn more about the racial wealth gap and how we were put behind, but as still, we can't blame the past. We can only focus on the present and build for the future. This is Sana IE. I'm XO. See you next week.